Director of the Rappaport Center for Law and Public Policy at Boston College Law School. On behalf of the Rappaport team, Cindy Nguyen and Professor Dan Canstrom, Faculty Director, welcome to our first webinar. For those of you who don't know the Rappaport Center, we've been at BC Law since 2015, and we are dedicated to inspiring law students and lawyers to spend some, or it could be all, of your careers working in the public sector at the intersection of law and public policy. Throughout the academic year, we bring together high-level policymakers, scholars, and members of the three branches of government to talk about policy issues that affect our lives, particularly in the realm of state and local policies. Now more than ever, given the recent days, we're witnessing the vitality and power of state and local government. In the next several months and the coming year, we're planning to hold additional webinars on issues relating to COVID-19 and attendant inequities across various sectors. During the summers, we run a fabulous fellowship program for 12 law students from law schools across Massachusetts. Each year, the students are chosen for, among other factors, their passion for public service, public policy, and law. Today, we're launching the Rappaport Center webinar series with 4 of our wonderful prior Rappaport Fellows representing our first 4 years at BC Law. So here's how the program will work. I'll be asking each of the panelists specific questions, and then we will reserve about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. You can all see and hear us, but we cannot see and hear anyone. So if you have questions you would like posed either to an individual panelist or to all 4, please write them in the Q&A area that you could see along the bottom of your screen. We'll try and get to as many of the questions as possible. I'm starting with James Bor-Zale, who was in our very first class of fellows after the Rappaport Center came to BC Law in 2015. So James, welcome. Thanks for
Thank you for having me.
You were in our very first cohort. You participated in the fellowship program after your 1L year at BC Law. So what have you been doing since you graduated from law school?
Yeah, it's a great question. So after graduating BC Law in 2017, the first thing I did was obviously take the bar exam, which I know people are trying to, back in the day when you can actually take it, when we're supposed to take it. So after the bar exam, I had the opportunity to actually clerk for the state Supreme Court here in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. And I had the distinct honor of clerking for Justice Scott Kafker. And that was a tremendous learning experience. Lizzie kind of alluded to the state and local issues and also, I guess, this intersection between state and federal. So I got to be Justice Kafker's first law clerk on the SJC, and it was a fascinating experience. We got to hear cases ranging from, first-degree murder cases to the regulation of the energy sector to whether caps on charter schools are constitutional. So it really ran the gamut, and I think the cool thing about, I think it kind of dovetails with being a Rappaport Fellow, but you get to see so much, things that you didn't really realize the nexus to public policy beforehand. So that was a really tremendous learning opportunity. For those who are law students in the audience, getting to work for a judge is probably one of the most valuable things you can do early on in your career. I think first, it really inspires you that that you went to law school, you're an attorney, you have what it takes, your opinions are valuable. And the second is you get feedback and mentoring from someone who's much more experienced in law than you are. So I really enjoyed my clerkship. That was a 1-year gig, as it is typically for most clerkships. And after that, I went to work for WilmerHale. I had summered there in 2016, and I was offered to come back, and they delayed my start date because of my clerkship. And so after clerking, I have been at WilmerHale. I'm in the litigation department there.
And so, James, you have shared with me privately that you've been able to do pro bono work since joining WilmerHale. How does that happen? And how does pro bono work work in terms of being an associate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So pro bono work is something that is very much at the heart of WilmerHale. There's, for example, there's the WilmerHale Legal Services Center, and also one of the, back in the old days when it was Hale and Dorr, one of the first partners, he was the one who basically created the idea of pro bono. So in terms of like what it looks like for an associate, essentially, I mean, the world's your oyster. There are so many different types of cases. We have actually a pro bono counsel whose sole job is to help bring in cases that need assistance. We have longstanding relationships with the Lawyers Committee, the ACLU. We also do litigation, impact litigation too. And a lot of it is adjacent to the work that other awesome legal aid entities are doing. So for example, I'm currently working on an asylum case, and that was recommended through the PAIR project in Boston. So we have a date set for individual hearing. We have 2 awesome clients, and we're going to try to keep them in the United States because of persecution that they suffered while abroad. In terms of other pro bono projects, the firm is really invested in anti-human trafficking work. So as a junior associate, I think the stereotype of being a big law firm is you don't get a chance to try cases, you don't get in-court experience, which I think some of that criticism is fair, but at least at WilmerHale, and particularly through pro bono cases, you get opportunities to be in court. I had my first argument, first motion in federal district court last year as part of a pro bono trial we were doing. It was a Riccio case, and our client was unfortunately a victim of human trafficking. And we had this novel idea of suing the hotel that knew or should have known that the trafficking was occurring. So I got to argue a motion to eliminate in front of Judge Saylor, which was a really cool opportunity for someone who had just been at the firm for not even a full year or so. So those are 2 things that I thought was really impactful. And then there's like all these other things that like I wish I had time for. Like there's weekly emails coming from our practice manager saying, hey, we need help with a class action suit to protest certain things that are going on with COVID-19. Things of that nature. So it's pretty interesting seeing the opportunities that pop up, and to know that you have the firm's backing to do the work. We litigate it in the same way that we would litigate any cases that are like billable or paid. It really shows the commitment. So for a firm like WilmerHale that does really well financially, it makes us feel, as associates, feel good that they're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of giving back to the local community and broaderly nationally.
Thanks, James. Do you think that the Rappaport Fellowship has influenced you in any way? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I think, so before the Rappaport Fellowship, I was a teacher, and I did one thing. And then before that, I was for undergrad, I studied government economics, big public policy, macroeconomics. And this is like, I think as big picture thinkers, you like to think broadly. But I think the Rappaport Fellowship encourages you to really dig deep and realize, actually, most of the policies are being made at the granular level. It's about who gets to go on parole. It's about how we're going to prepare for the next crisis. It's about how you're going to negotiate with unions over contract. It's about the air rights around Fenway Park. And that granularity, I think, is something that I didn't necessarily appreciate before the fellowship. And I think as an attorney, I think it encourages me to really take on things that at service levels, you're not sure where it's going, but then you realize, okay, oh wow, like this little minutia makes a big difference, and it's important work. So I think the Rappaport Fellowship really starts to inculcate that curiosity about things that you ordinarily didn't know about, but now you have a chance to learn and experience.
I love that, inculcate curiosity. That's great. What is one piece of practical advice you would give law students starting out?
So I think one thing I would say is, even in law school, I think the most helpful thing I got to do was be an attorney before practicing. So be for the clinics. So being able to be a student attorney, being 303 certified, there's nothing quite like practicing to be a lawyer than being a lawyer. And I had the opportunity to be in the partner clinics, and you get to work with people who, the clinical supervisors who've been practicing law for a really, really long time. And unlike the private sector, in some ways, they have so much, their whole job is to train and educate you. So I think the best piece of advice that I would say is, seek out those opportunities where you get mentorship, where you get on the court, on your feet experience, because when you're taking your first deposition, when you're getting ready for your first trial, you have to think about to like what sort of experiences can ground you. And if you have done it already as a student attorney, if you've seen it as a clerk, I think those kind of things are really helpful.
Great. Thank you, James. I'm going to move on now to Rodline Louijeune, who was a 2016 Rappaport Fellow. She participated in the program after her 2L year, also a Boston College law student. And Rodline, where did you spend your Rappaport summer?
So good afternoon, Lissy. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and speaking with current law students. So when I was a Rappaport Fellow, it was the summer of 2016. I worked with State Treasurer Deb Goldberg in her office, in her General Counsel's office, and in the Office of Economic Empowerment. And while I was there, I worked on, the normal general counsel stuff for a state treasurer, which is things like bonds. I'm trying to think, bonds, payment, cash flow, and those types of issues. And also the lottery was doing some interesting stuff at the time that I got to work on as well. But really why I wanted to work there is because she was, or the treasurer was doing some really progressive policy around economic empowerment and financial literacy in the kind of Worcester to Pioneer Valley part of Massachusetts. And I was really interested in that because of my background. I'm from Boston originally. I'm very dedicated to really thinking about how we can bridge the social, cultural, and economic gaps that kind of exist in this city and in this region. And so working for Treasurer Goldberg, who was doing some progressive policy at that time, was really a treat because I got to see hands on the ground how elected officials and she is also a BC Law alum, and lawyers can really impact not just the legal aspects, but also the policy and develop and implement creative policies.
And now I know you are working for Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins,
Yes.
who's a good friend to the Rappaport Center. What are you doing there?
So right now I'm an assistant district attorney in Suffolk County. I work in the West Roxbury courthouse. And so now I am just a line ADA. I stand in court most days when the coronavirus is not impacting us. I stand in court most days, either running pretrial session or on trial. I also run the mental health court session in West Roxbury. It's called Recovery with Justice, and it's really thinking about how to really help defendants with mental health or substance abuse, and most oftentimes dual diagnosis issues kind of guide their way through the court system.
Great. So I'm going to ask you the same two questions I asked James. Do you think the Rappaport Fellowship has had any influence on you? And if so, share with us, please, what that influence has been.
Definitely, Lisa, you know that so when I was a fellow, I walked in, there's like the inaugural kind of reception that the Rappaport has. I walked into the room with all the board members, and Rachel was there, our district attorney Rollins was there, and she saw the class and it was like, great work, Lissa, you for picking such a diverse group. I hope this continues. And so from there, I really tracked her and I really looked up to her and I really admired her. So when she announced that she was running for DA, I asked to work on her campaign. So I became her finance director. And after that, I came into office with her. When I first got into office with her, I started working on, I'm not sure if anybody's heard, if you haven't heard, I encourage everybody to look at the Rollins policy memo, which really thinks about criminal justice reform and putting it into place, at least within Suffolk County. And then I worked on expungement, which due to the criminal justice reform bill of 20, 2018 now, was really, and is still really taking shape across Massachusetts. And then I came into district court. So I would say that Rappaport has really impacted my life because it has really directly put me in touch with Rachel and put me directly into the position that I am now. Even though I did, when Rachel first asked me to come into her office with her, I said no, because I did not imagine I would be a prosecutor. If you had asked me when I was graduating whether or not I would be an ADA, I would have said absolutely not. Yet here I am, ADA and all, with like a bunch of files with me as I work from home.
I was in Rodline's section, and I can attest that I would not have thought she was going to be an ADA.
And so, Rodline, what one single piece of advice might you offer to lawyers starting out?
I mean, you know, I really kind of want to realize and honor the time that we're living in. You guys are definitely graduating in a different economy and a different time than we are. So there are some things that are going to be a little bit more challenging for you. But there's one thing that, you know, Rachel always said on the campaign, and it sounds a little iffy, but I think it's really good when you think about it. It says, as she said, make them tell you no, right? And that sounds problematic. But really what that means is that, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out. You see Mario, James, and I are here. If you have any questions, don't be afraid. Don't let your fear stop you. And really think about, you know, how you can make the best of every opportunity, you know, and that is really one thing that I think will be helpful to you guys as you navigate this time. There are some of you that are going to come out of this just fine. There's some of you that are going to have to struggle a little bit more, but really think about how you can use your resources to you, and don't be afraid to ask, is I think the key point of this. And so I would say, if I could give you guys any piece of advice, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask for a coffee, to network, advice, whatever it is you're seeking. Don't be afraid to ask, because all they can tell you is no, right? And so if they tell you no, you move on to the next one, and you figure it out from there.
I think that is really good advice. I have often shared with many of my colleagues and some of my mentees, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I applaud that piece of advice. I want to move on. Thank you, Rodline, to Mario Paredes. Mario is a Boston University School of Law student, and he also participated after his 2L year. Is that right? Did I get that right? Mario?
That is correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mario came to law school with a master's degree from the Graduate School of Education at Harvard. So what did you do during your Rappaport summer, Mario?
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for everyone who's watching and listening in. I know I've had a few tech issues, so hopefully this will run smoothly. But so I, for my Rappaport Fellowship, had worked in the office of State Senator William Brownsberger. So it was, you know, it was something I had never done. I had never really participated at the State House other than in the advocacy side of things when I was doing a lot of community work before entering law school. And so I wanted to gain that kind of exposure of working on public policy at the State House. And, you know, I got paired with State Senator William Brownsberger. And honestly, it was a great experience because it really got me to intersect. And I'll talk a little bit about the work I'm doing, but it got me in the mind frame of how to blend the work of being a community organizer with somebody who's interested in policy and obviously legal advocacy. And so I got to work on criminal justice issues. At the time, he was the chair, or one of the co-chairs of the Judiciary Committee that was at the time very busy because they were working on the criminal justice reform package that many might know about here in Massachusetts, and also working on the marijuana legislation as well that had, you know, passed a few years back. So it was a very busy time between that and budgeting. So that's where I was throughout the summer, and, you know, to this day, still keeping in contact with his office.
So he's a great state senator, and Will Brownsberger and Rachel Rollins just participated in a big program we did truly days before we were not permitted to gather in large groups. And you should look for it on our website because it was a program on criminal justice reform with the two of them and District Attorney Marion Ryan, U.S. Senator Edward Markey, and Sheriff Middlesex County Sheriff Peter Katujian. So for people interested in criminal justice reform, I encourage you to look at that. So Mario, you have not just one, but two fellowships right now, or I should say a joint fellowship. Tell us about what you're doing.
Yeah, so transitioning, basically to give a very quick summary, my interest in law school was immigration-related law and kind of the intersection of that with the criminal legal system. So that's why I had gotten interested in the Rappaport Fellowship and a few other, clinical experiences and classes on campus. So when I graduated and after the Rappaport Fellowship as well, I took on a fellowship program. So I transitioned recently, late last year. So I was working for a year with Mass Law Reform Institute here in Boston. And then while I was working for them for a year, we kind of started having conversations around a project of looking at conditions in immigrant detention centers here in Massachusetts. And so that started a conversation between Mass Law Reform Institute and Prisoners Legal Services, who had already been doing this type of work in the general population for folks who are incarcerated, in the House of Corrections and Department of Corrections here in Massachusetts. So they had already been doing this work, and they've been doing great work for, decades at this point. But there weren't any specific resources behind looking at those type of issues when it comes to immigrants who are in detention. And as we know, the immigration detention system has been, increasing honestly over the last 25 years. And that includes here in Massachusetts, where immigrants are detained in county jails. So, given the intersection of the work I was doing in my interest area and the exposure I had already working with mass law reform for a year, we ended up partnering with Prisoners Legal Services. So now I'm doing a Bart Gordon Fellowship with both organizations, where I get to basically collaborate between the two and be the liaison between the two, because mass law reform has the expertise when it comes to policy and immigration related work, and Prisoners Legal Service has the expertise working with the incarcerated population. So that's where I'm right now. We've been running this new project now since September officially of last year. And, I've been visiting with immigrants who are detained at the 3 county facilities in Massachusetts, and organizing really with attorneys, community organizers, advocates, and, affected community members as well, to make sure that we're protecting their rights while they're in detention, and obviously with the end goal of trying to get them out of there.
Really important work. Thanks, Mario. So for you, the same 2 questions. Has the Rappaport Fellowship influenced you in any way? And if so, how? And what piece of practical advice would you give people starting out in their careers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Similar to what's been mentioned already, I think for me specifically, being, a first generation student, and, law was a brand new world to me. Like I mentioned before, I came in from a community organizing perspective. And so for me, it was really important to make the most of my time in law school. Like I said, whether that was through the classes I took, the clinics, the experiential learning, experiences that I had. And Rappaport played a huge role in that, because up until Rappaport Fellowship, I didn't have any personal direct experience doing policy related work. So that was my entry point really into doing that. Really right beyond the summer Rappaport Fellowship, I continued working with the senator, doing some work around human trafficking. So I continued my Rappaport experience into basically a clinical experience when I went back into my 3rd year of law school. And honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better experience, because that really gave me a legs up in having understanding of how the intersection of policy, organizing, and being a legal advocate, really works, and especially behind the scenes. So to me, that was extremely important, and I'm super appreciative of that. And I guess for your second question, in terms of then what advice would I kind of offer now, I think really getting out there and being exposed to the issues you care about and the type of work you care about. So whether that means doing the direct networking with folks who are already doing that type of work, that's been extremely important to me. Like I said, I'm working right now with a mix of advocates, attorneys, community organizers, and having had the experience of really working with policymakers and advocates behind the scenes while I was in law school really got me that exposure so that I could kind of hit the ground running once I started doing this work and already had those connections. So I would say get out there. If there's issues you care about, start connecting with those folks. Just make relationships with them, reach out to them, start asking questions. Pay attention obviously to like the local news of what's happening around those issues as well. I think that's going to help you understand whether that's an issue that you really want to continue pursuing, or just help you even honestly in the process. For example, the Rappaport Fellowship, right? When you're going through the interview process, knowing a little bit about the type of work you want to do and why it matters to you. So to me, I think that would be the advice I would give.
Thank you, Mario. We are now joined by Lauren Koster. That was perfect, impeccable timing, Lauren.
Unbelievable.
So Lauren's fellowship happened in 2018. She was also a 2L. We're following her 2L year and a BC Law student. So Lauren, what did you do during the summer of your Rappaport Fellowship?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to you, Lissy. Wonderful to see you, as well as my fellow panelists, and greetings to everyone who's joining us. I apologize for my late arrival, but unbelievably well-timed at that. My judge needed to confer with me and my co-clerk at 11:30, and it took significantly longer than I expected. So after my 2L year, I was a Rappaport Fellow at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, affectionately referred to as DESE. And so that summer, one of my flagship projects was working on a new set of regulations around English language acquisition and dual language acquisition for native English speakers in the Commonwealth. It was an incredible project and really a great jumpstart to that summer to be able to take public feedback, feedback from everyone from teachers unions to teachers themselves, educators, families, community members, and work on actually revising an entire policy throughout the Commonwealth that would recognize the value of bilingualism, multilingualism, and try to encourage students to graduate with a certificate that would recognize their language skills so that they could take those skills and transfer them either to a college or work setting afterwards.
So you alluded to that you had a meeting with the judge. Tell us what you're doing now post-graduation.
Gladly. So since last September, I have been clerking for Judge Paul Barbadoro in the United States District Court for the District of New Hampshire. So I'm in a federal trial court. We are dealing with all sorts of cases, everything from employment discrimination to police brutality to I worked on a patent case the entire month of October, so it really runs the gambit. But it's a great way for someone like me who wants to do direct representation and work on public policy issues throughout their career to really see how some of those issues play out on that level.
And you have something rather fantastic lined up following your clerkship. So could you share with all of us what that is?
Yes, thank you, Lissy. So I am very honored to be one of 28 Skadden Fellows this coming fall. Unclear exactly when that will kick off. Of course, we're being influenced by the global pandemic that we're in, but I will be beginning to serve sometime between this late summer, fall period for 2 years. My fellowship will be with the Massachusetts, or with the Children's Law Center up in Lynn on the North Shore. And I'll be working on representing kids in foster care with a particular emphasis on preserving their right to an education and education stability while they may be transferred. So that very happily intersects that law and public policy in so very many ways.
So Lauren, I've asked everybody a question that I hadn't shared in advance, but do you think the Rappaport Fellowship has influenced you in any way? And if so, how?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to do a Rappaport Fellowship, and particularly work at my host organization, was because I had finished a clinical program over the course of my 2L year at BC. I had done the Juvenile Rights Advocacy Program, and known as JRAP. And I had the sense that there were so many of these issues that occurred at a more systemic level based on what I was seeing with my clients. And so I wanted to go from doing direct representation to working more on a policy level, and the state agency was the perfect place to do that work and be able to see really what I saw as the flip side of the issues I had seen in my clinic. I then really took that experience between the clinic and my experience at DESE as a Rappaport Fellow, and used that as a starting point for brainstorming ideas for my fellowship. And so I think really without having this experience, I would not have had as strong of an application as I had, and be able to really think about the issues that I wanted to work on in a not just more cohesive way, but also a more comprehensive way when pitching what I ultimately want to do.
And what is one piece of practical, concrete advice that you would offer to law students and newer lawyers starting out?
I always recommend just being flexible and looking for opportunities in areas that might not immediately jump out as exactly what you want to be doing. I certainly, when I was first going through summer internships as a 1L student, sort of cast the net very widely. And I think that allowed me to see how many different opportunities were out there to work on issues in the public sector. I've gone to tons of Rappaport panels as a student, and I see my colleagues and my friends and mentees of mine going through the job application process and having, well, this is where I ultimately want to end up, so I'm just going to start there. And I think especially as we look at how the job market might be in flux presently, it's incredibly important to just chase down leads if you get them. I'm watching my co-clerk do that, and it's been a really rewarding process for him to be able to see, oh, I could work for a union, I could work for an attorney general's office, I could go to a legal aid organization, and ultimately thinking of the values behind the work that you want to do, I think can open up more opportunities than just thinking of the nuts and bolts or the specific clientele that you want to serve.
So thanks, Lauren. That is a perfect segue to my next question, which is to all four of you. What are some of the best resources you could suggest to people who want to go into law and public policy? Are there specific sites that you've gone to, people you've gone to, organizations you've thought of? I mean, you just said, Lauren, unions, attorney general's offices, other ideas, resources you can brainstorm about?
So yes, and I will also answer a question that I got directly on Zoom here to repeat the name of the fellowship. So I'm doing the Skadden Fellowship, and that would actually be one of the resources that I would recommend. So when I was looking into, I think first and foremost, fellowships are a really great place to start, because you can both design your own project and kind of think about various unique avenues of pursuing the work that you want to do. And so there's so many resources and pre-existing projects I think are a great starting point. So you can actually go to the Skadden Foundation website and take a look at former projects. Equal Justice Works is another great place for people who might be curious about doing public interest work, but perhaps in a more policy-oriented way. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, go to the Rappaport Center, especially look at the programs. If you're lucky enough to be at BC Law, there's just no, I think, absolutely incredible ideas that can come out of those conversations, looking at where people work, who they're representing, and then using that as a way to go check out, are they hiring? What kind of opportunities do they have available? What kind of work do they do? And of course, you know, in law school, you're building your network, whether I think you realize it or not. And so talking to people that already care about you and know your interests can really help with the brainstorming process, whether that's going to career services, whether that's talking to someone like Lissy, who seems to always have a Rolodex of ideas and opportunities at the ready. It can mean talking to professors and understanding what their careers look like beforehand. You know, I find that there's certainly plenty of opportunities that are listed through career services, and there's just an abundance of information at our disposal, but sometimes it can really just be helpful to talk to people who have already tread that path, or at least really understand you and can ask you some probing questions to help you better understand what you might be looking for.
Thanks, Lauren. James, Rodline, Mario, want to chime in? Other ideas?
I could chime in very briefly, just because I had a recent interaction that was actually really helpful. So as I mentioned before, I'm a BU law graduate, but I actually got help from the BC law librarian who I attended a training, and she actually was super helpful. I work, obviously, as I mentioned before, in the nonprofit world. Resources can sometimes be a little bit tight in this world, but you have to kind of make do with what you have. And so I went to a training by the BC Law Librarian, who gave us a lot of resources that we could use, and a lot of free resources that many folks don't know about, especially as new attorneys or, law students. So, for example, the Social Law Library is a resource that I've used in the past. So that's, you could get membership for that, and depending on whether you're a student or, if you work in a firm or nonprofit, there's, different rates for that. There's also the State Law Library at the State House in Massachusetts, where, anyone could walk in and ask questions in regards to that. I've definitely used that in the past, specifically when I was doing my fellowship. As I mentioned before, in terms of connecting and immersing yourself with the issues you care about, join different listservs out there that would kind of get you up to date with what's going on and give you updates. There's also a lot of great toolkits online. For me specifically, I work in the immigration space a lot, so I participate in a lot of. I look into a lot of toolkits that are put out there by different organizations, whether it's the ACLU, whether it's ILRC, whether it's the Detention Watch Network. They'll have toolkits, webinars that they host to kind of get free learning and continued education, even post-graduation. So that's all really helpful. And then obviously, once you're an attorney, I would just encourage you to join your bar associations, right? Whether it's the Boston Bar, the Mass Bar Association, the affinity groups that there are. So I know this year I joined one of the councils for the Access to Justice Council at the Mass Bar Association, just to kind of get my foot in the door, meeting other attorneys, and making sure that tapping into the resources that are available here at the state level. So that would be my recommendations.
Bar associations are really useful and can provide great resources and incredible networking and connections. Either of you, James or Rodline? Otherwise, I have a last question to ask all of you.
I would say, so I guess just to add on to that, I think just trying to stay current with the news. One digest I really like is Commonwealth magazine. So I think just getting things from like a law adjacent perspective, and just to keep up on what public policy issues are out there. Particularly, once you focus in on what you're passionate about, it's also good to kind of see like what else is out there. So, finding a few reputable things. So like in law school, you can sign up for Mass Law 360 digest stuff. Commonwealth magazine has like a daily digest that I try to peruse. So, things like that to keep you current, to see what's going on out there. Thanks.
Rodline, last.
Yeah, no, I would just highlight what everybody said so far. You are still law students, or most of the people on the call. So you get a lot of things for free. That, however, does not last. So you have to start paying for things. So whether it's really using the Boston Bar Association, the Mass Bar Association, any of the diversity bar associations like the MBLA, the Asian American Bar Association, Mass Black Women's Association, I'd reach out to, and one thing that lawyers love to do is talk about themselves. So, you know, reaching out to them, asking them questions. And one thing that I like to do is kind of work backwards, right? I would see somebody that I liked, see somebody, you know, career that, you know, I could see myself being that person, you know, 10, 20 years down the line. And I would look at their profile, speak with them, and see what, you know, real practical advice they had for me. And these are all things that you can see. You know, firms have websites. LinkedIn is a great resource now. So really thinking about what you have at your disposal, and also taking advantage of the status as a student, I think would be my two pieces of advice.
Thanks. So lastly, the world is a different place for all of us right now, and everyone is dealing with challenges, and I might add some opportunities. People are able to connect in different ways than ever before. So if you're willing to share with us, how has COVID-19 impacted your professional life or your personal life, or both? So I don't know, who would like to start?
I'm happy to kick things off, Lizzie. So of course I am home. That's readily apparent, as we all are. We are now doing Zoom court hearings. And so there was a huge constitutional law question around how we can preserve the public right of access for the public writ large, how we can preserve access to the courts, as well as protect court employees, protect anyone appearing in court, and then also preserve the right for criminal defendants to have a public open hearing. I think these questions are fascinating. It's certainly been an incredibly interesting discussion to engage in as a clerk, and to see how different courts are trying to address that issue. When Congress passed the CARES Act to provide support to many Americans, but also try to address the pandemic in some structural ways, that included our ability to actually host these hearings online, because that is a constitutional question. So that needed to be addressed through legislation. So we now, as we go through our proceedings, have to ask certain questions of defendants and defendants counsel to ensure that we are essentially that a defendant is knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waiving the right to that public appearance. That said, the public is able to access our hearings should they request access to the Zoom. Of course, there's been lots of questions around Zoom security and the quote unquote Zoom bombing that's been happening. We are well aware of that. We have an incredible clerk staff, our administrative staff, that have been helping us and supporting us. So we do have IT staff on call during all of our hearings as well. And to my knowledge, we haven't had any issues in our court. Of course, the public does have a right to access this. So, to some extent, I wouldn't necessarily change anything for us should somebody accidentally wander in to a Zoom hearing, but they are, the public is able to access that and access certain proceedings, especially if someone has an interest in something and they want to be a part of that. That's important. But the issues abound. Certainly there are, for attorneys who have clients who can't access that technology, incarcerated clients, there are just logistical situations that are more challenging than others. But I've been sitting in on several plea hearings and sentencings, mostly with those who are incarcerated, and part of the calculation there is to have that in an expedited fashion so that those who would be potentially eligible for release are able to get out. And when we are releasing people, we are ensuring that either the place at which they are incarcerated or the U.S. Marshal Service is providing them with a mask and ensuring that they are able to be transported and then quarantined for 2 weeks before they are free to go about their release as quote unquote normal. So lots of professional influence, components, legal components to this. But otherwise, my job has changed very little, frankly. I spend most of my day researching, writing, usually with my co-clerk. We check in weekly, my judge and I, and my co-clerk and I, we all check in together weekly. So I see less of them than I would if I was in chambers, but my actual day-to-day work itself hasn't changed drastically.
Well, thanks, Lauren. Who next? Rodline, your hand is up.
Yeah, no, I can go. I will echo a lot of what Lauren said. As an ADA, we are encountering some of the same issues, really thinking critically about how you can really respect the constitutional rights of defendants, but also ensure the safety of, the judges, the ADAs, the probation officers, the clerks in the court. And also, this is a new phenomenon that, has happened with the quarantine, also protecting the rights of victims. Since the beginning of this quarantine, there's been, a marked increase in domestic violence incidents. And so really thinking critically about how do you balance all of these tensions, but also protect the victim while they might have to stay at home if this attacker or this attacker is out on the street, or all of the above. So really thinking about how my position has been impacted. Fortunately for me, I work for a district attorney who, at the very beginning of this crisis, was like, this is what we're going to do. We hadn't really heard from the court system at that time. So our office policy is that there are our whole office is divided into teams. And so some of our teams work from home some weeks, and some of us go in some weeks. So this week I'm working from home. Next week I will be in the courthouse. And within the courthouse, there are certain protocols that we have to follow. Like, everything is through Zoom, a lot of Zoom hearings, and also really thinking about, we still, our ADA still go into the courtroom with judges, court officers, and probation officers and clerks, and really thinking about how we practice social distancing in the courtroom. The defendants are at the police stations, and they're practicing social distancing there. So that is really how it plays out in the practical day-to-day. But I imagine, and as Lauren noted before, there are going to be constitutional questions about people who are still held on bail, people who are in pretrial detention, who are awaiting trial, because at this point we're not hearing any trials. Right now we're not hearing any trials unless they're bench trials, and we haven't had a bench trial yet. We're not hearing trials because all jurors have been canceled through May 4th. And given that school has been canceled in Massachusetts, it's probably going to be a bit longer, but we haven't had an official announcement about that. So we're going to court to basically arraign folks. Also really think about people who are awaiting superior court indictment and how that interacts with district court criminal cases. And so COVID has really impacted my life personally, because I still have to go into work to make sure that, we still have the ball rolling. But I also am very grateful that sometimes I can work from home and really still work on my trials and my cases. I still have a box of my trials that I'm working on, and just prepping them for whenever we can go back to court, whenever we can have trials. And I'm emailing defense attorneys. Not many of them are emailing me back, so they might be taking this as a vacation. But really still working on my cases and trials. So yeah.
Thanks, Rodline. And I'm venturing to guess that many criminal defense lawyers are actually working diligently these days, and I hope they all get back to you soon. All right, let's go to Mario. How about you?
Great, thank you. Yeah, just to echo, I think, as we all know, everyone's been affected by this in one way or another, whether it's those of us who are fortunate enough to still have our jobs right now, or those who have unfortunately lost employment, and as we probably are aware of, a lot of us in times of emergencies, marginalized communities end up being doubly affected by what's going on. And so we're seeing that I'm seeing that both personally in my life and also, in the professional spaces that I'm in. So personally in my life, and I'll, kind of connect this really directly to the work I'm doing. Literally 3 weeks ago to this day, my uncle passed away in New York due to COVID-19. And it was, similar to what we're hearing here in Massachusetts, where, low income and communities of color are the ones being, doubly affected by this. But like I said, everyone's being affected in one way or another. The same thing happened out in New York where he was living. And so unfortunately, my family was directly hit by that. And now, I'm working with communities who are going through the same thing, and a lot, like I said, a lot of the folks I work with are in detention spaces. And so they're away from family. We keep hearing how scared for their lives they are and how scared their family members who are on the outside are. And so we're trying to make sure that we could do all we can to protect them during these times. To make sure there's a line of communication between them and the public, because it's a lot of times spaces that not too many people are either aware of or keeping up to date with. So I think it's really affected everyone. We've obviously in my job had to rethink how we approach this work right now and maintaining communication with folks in detention and communicating between ourselves and, also making sure that we're paying attention to our own mental health as well as we do all this. So fortunately, I could say I work for really great colleagues and supervisors who provide that type of space. And that's, I think the last thought I'll leave this on is to make sure that everyone is kind of looking out for their mental health and their personal and familial health as well, as we continue doing this work. So again, appreciate the time for being on this webinar.
And Mario, we're all so sorry for your loss and condolences to your whole family. James, and then we have 2 questions before we end this webinar.
Sure. So as a civil litigator, there's, I guess, a lot of the work continues. So you can do your brief writing, your research at home. So in that sense, there's some continuity. Probably the biggest change is maybe not for people who are maybe more conversant with technology, but for example, last 2 weeks, I've been preparing for remote depositions. So we'll be doing depositions by Zoom. One of my colleagues has a bench trial by Zoom in a couple weeks. So I think trying to get used to the new normal is something that's challenging. I mean, for the discovery process, if you need to have documents or things produced, it's a little bit hard when places are under lockdown. So I think from the civil bench, I think the experience is that a lot of things are being delayed. Case schedules that you had a trial for, September, now it's going to get pushed to January. So I think there's like a little bit of a lag effect in how it'll really impact it. Obviously, like firms are assessing assessing their financial health. Luckily, I think our firm hasn't affected as severely as others. But certainly, it's a challenging time, and I think on my end, in relation to like for what Rodline and Mario and Lawrence talked about, like is we're relatively on the lucky end in terms of the fact that the civil litigation stuff it's still moving on, although we'll see what will befall the next 3 to 6 months.
Thanks, James. So we have 3 questions. I'm going to start with the 2 that I think are from students, and I will end with the 3rd question from our esteemed Jerome Lyle Rappaport, Jerry Rappaport, for whom our wonderful Rappaport Center is named. Jerry, yours is going to end our webinar. So this question, hi all. I'm an undergraduate at Boston College, interested in a future in public legal policy work. Can anyone on the panel see opportunity for undergrads in the legal community? And then Mario, could you perhaps talk more about the resources you used for starting grassroots community advocacy work prior to attending law school? So, anybody, opportunities for undergrads in the legal community? Mina, I would venture to offer you should be looking at each of the organizations you might be interested in, the legal service organizations, and reaching out to them to find out if they would take interns from the undergraduate community. To the best of my knowledge, some of the legal service organizations do provide opportunities for undergrads. I can't speak specifically about any in particular. Do any of you know? You're
Yeah,
all
I think,
muted, so you should unmute yourselves.
sorry. So we are living in a really exciting time right now where a lot of communities are coming together to really work on different issues that impact their communities. So really looking at like your community organizations, I think is a great way to really start, because they're always looking for free legal work or lawyer work. And though you guys aren't lawyers yet, really thinking about how you can pair it is one. Pair it with law, like pair policy with law, which is really important these days, is one way to go about it. Two, I would also offer to really look at paralegal work. I know my office, at least, we were hiring paralegals. I don't think that we are doing that anymore, but like paralegal work, you do not need a law degree for. You can do that with an undergraduate degree. And in fact, I feel like there are at least a number of people in my law school class who did that type of work to kind of bridge the gap between undergrad and law school. It also gives you a sense of the legal profession and really whether or not you want to pursue it. There are also like really amazing organizations, like I'm completely blanking on them, but they pay for fellowships for you in case you want to go to law school between the gap years. And I will look them up on my phone and on my laptop as we speak, and send them into the chat.
So I don't want to miss the opportunity to have Jerry Rappaport's question asked and answered. And so it may be, Mario, that you could respond privately to the question. But Jerry Rappaport's one of the true pillars of civic and philanthropic life in the Massachusetts community, and the founder with Phyllis Rappaport of the Rappaport Center. So we love Jerry. And his question is, have you found any benefit in networking with Rappaport Fellows, as we like to call one another, fellow fellows? And would you, each of you, be available as mentors? So if you would unmute yourself, benefit in networking with your fellow fellows, and yes or no, would you be a mentor?
Yeah, in terms of like, I think the fellows, that's one of the reasons to do the fellowship. You know, I think during the actual fellowship, you get like the weekly get-togethers, and you get to hear all the awesome things that your fellow fellows are doing. And then there's reunions, so you get to meet other people who were a year or two before or after you, and they're all over the place. Yeah, so it's the organic relationships that stem out of this shared experience of being a fellow. Like you really can't beat it. In terms of being a mentor, like absolutely. I think I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for Lainey Sullivan, who was a 2011 fellow. And then I certainly wouldn't be where I would if not for the Rappaport director, Lissy, of course, and then my mentors during the time as a fellow. So absolutely.
Thank you, James. Okay, the other three. A, would you be a mentor?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with James, and certainly this is a good reminder to reach out to some of my fellow fellows in the midst of this, because I certainly miss seeing them, and really looked forward to seeing my fellows every week. I think we had a great class in 2018, and genuinely really enjoyed getting to know each other. And insofar as mentorships, absolutely, I'm excited to see us continue to expand the Rappaport Connects platform, because I think that's a great way for us to all stay connected as well. But I am more than always 100% open to being a mentor in any way I can, and find that mentorship, both receiving and giving, is really one of the most rewarding opportunities I've been able to pursue through BC Law and through the Rappaport Center. So 100% I am very much available.
Thank you, Lauren. Rodline, Mario, thumbs up to being mentors?
Sign me up.
You up. And it benefits in networking, yes, right?
Absolutely.
So I would encourage all of the law students out there who will be entering your 1L or 2L year, please look into the Rappaport Fellowship. It provides extraordinary opportunities to learn from the highest level policymakers in state and local government, as well as to learn from all your peers, fellow fellows. If you're interested, please be sure to reach out to me. I go to all the law schools in the fall with Cindy Wynn as a team, and we will share all of the great advantages and benefits that we can provide through the fellowship. I want to thank James, Rodline, Mario, Lauren. Thank you so much for being here today and being wonderful fellows. We love to bring our alumni back. We love to make sure people stay connected and have opportunities to share the incredible work that you're all doing. And I hope and believe we'll continue to be doing. So for all of you, stay healthy, be safe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much, Lucy. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.